The air, thick with ash and the acrid stench of burning plastic, was a physical weight. It pressed down on the crowd, a suffocating blanket of despair. In the heart of the chaos, a 3-story apartment building vomited black smoke and tongues of orange flame, a monstrous, living beast consuming wood and dreams with equal ferocity. Firefighters, silhouettes against the hellish glow, aimed torrents of water that seemed to vanish into the inferno with a defiant hiss. The roar was constant, a dragon's throat clearing before the final, collapsing exhalation. Trapped. That was the word echoing in the panicked shouts, the frantic radio chatter, and the silent prayers of the onlookers. A young soldier, home on leave, had charged back into the collapsing structure to save a neighbor's child. He'd gotten the child out, a soot-stained bundle passed through a shattered window to waiting hands, but a sudden backdraft had slammed the doors shut on his own escape. Now, somewhere on the second floor, he and his military K-9, a Belgian Malinois named Atlas, were caught. The heat was too intense, the structure too compromised. Fire Chief Thompson, a man whose belly strained the buttons of his uniform, barked orders with the frustration of a commander losing a battle. "Pull the line back! The whole east wall is about to go. It's a recovery, not a rescue. I'm calling it." A woman's cry pierced the din. "No! My son!" It was the soldier's mother, held back by 2 police officers. Thompson's face was a mask of grim finality. It was then that a lone figure stepped through the police tape, moving with a calm that was utterly alien to the scene. She was a woman of indeterminate age, dressed in simple jeans and a worn jacket, her face etched with a quiet intensity. She wasn't a firefighter, not a cop, not a paramedic. She was nobody. "Chief," she said, her voice even and low, cutting through the noise with surprising clarity. Thompson spun around, his face ruddy with heat and anger. "Who the hell are you? Get back behind the line. This is an active scene, lady." The woman's eyes, a startlingly clear gray, didn't focus on him, but on the dying building. "You're losing pressure on your pumper truck. The angle of that ladder is wrong, it's putting stress on a load-bearing wall that's already compromised." Thompson stared, his mouth agape. "What did you just say?" A young firefighter nearby overheard, his eyes widening slightly. She was right. He'd seen the pressure gauge flicker. Thompson's face hardened, his authority challenged. "I don't need a civilian critic telling me how to do my job. We have a man and a dog in there we can't get to. It's over." He turned his back on her, a gesture of absolute dismissal. A collective sigh of hopelessness rippled through the crowd. From the edge of the throng, a man muttered what everyone was thinking. "She can't save them. Nobody can." The woman, Sarah, didn't flinch at the chief's dismissal. She didn't retreat behind the yellow tape. Instead, she walked with unhurried purpose toward a group of younger firefighters, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and grief. They watched her approach, wary. She was an anomaly, a disruption to their grim, ordered world of failure. "What's the thermal layering like on the second floor, east side?" she asked one of them, a man barely in his 20s. He blinked, taken aback by the technical question. High. Extremely high. Over 1,000 degrees near the ceiling." She nodded, as if he'd confirmed a calculation in her head. "The floor joists, are they dimensional lumber or I-joists?" The young firefighter exchanged a confused look with his partner. "Dimensional, I think. Old building." "Good," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "They'll char, but they'll hold longer." Chief Thompson stomped over, his patience vaporized. "I told you to get out of here. Now! Or I'll have you arrested for interfering." He jabbed a thick finger toward her face. It was in that moment, as she turned to face him fully, that the intense light from the fire caught the side of her face and neck. A web of scarred tissue, pale and puckered, snaked from below her ear, disappearing into the collar of her jacket. It was a burn scar, but not a typical one. It was unnaturally uniform in its pattern, a brand of some past agony. The young firefighter who had answered her questions gasped. His eyes locked onto the scar, then shot wide with a dawning, impossible recognition. He'd seen a picture once, in a dusty copy of Stars and Stripes in his grandfather's attic. A grainy photo from Fallujah. A hero who wasn't supposed to exist anymore. "No way," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. His partner looked at him. "What is it, man?" "The scar," he breathed, unable to look away from her. "The story, about the ED tech who shielded her squad from a thermobaric charge. They said she vanished after her recovery." A ghost, he looked at Sarah, whose calm expression never wavered under Thompson's tirade. He was connecting dots that seemed insane. The technical knowledge, the preternatural calm, the scar. A legend. A myth whispered in barracks and VFW halls. He fumbled for his radio, switching to a private channel with a battalion chief he knew was ex-Marine. "Chief, you're not gonna believe this, but I think the Wraith of Ramadi is here." The name hung in the air between them, a piece of folklore made flesh. The radio silence on the other end was telling. The battalion chief's voice, when it finally came back, was tight with disbelief. "Son, you'd better not be seeing things in the smoke." But the younger firefighter was resolute. "Sir, the burned scar. It's her. I swear it." On the street, Chief Thompson was still red-faced, bellowing. "Are you deaf? I said get out." Sarah met his furious gaze. Her voice, still measured, held a new edge, a steel forged in fires hotter than this one. "Chief, you are about to preside over the unnecessary deaths of a soldier and his K9. Your strategy is containment. It should be extraction. You're fighting the fire. You need to fight the building." Her words were a direct assault on his competence, delivered with the cold precision of a surgeon. A ripple of murmuring went through the nearby firefighters. They had all felt it, the sense that their tactics were failing, that they were merely spectators to a tragedy. But it took this woman, this outsider, to articulate it. Thompson's face purpled. "You think you know better than me? I've got 25 years on this job. And I have a lifetime of experience in places you can't imagine, dealing with collapses you've only read about in textbooks," she replied. There was no arrogance in her tone, only a statement of fact. "There is a window of opportunity. It's closing in about 90 seconds. We can get them out." The crowd, sensing the shift in dynamics, pressed closer to the tape. The soldier's mother looked at Sarah, her tear-streaked face now filled with a sliver of desperate, bewildered hope. Who was this woman? The whispers started to spread, passed from the young firefighter to his comrades, then to the cops at the perimeter. "They say she's a Marine, some kind of legend, the Scar, from Iraq or Afghanistan." The myth was growing, taking root in the fertile ground of desperation. Thompson, feeling his authority crumble in front of his own men, made a final, foolish stand. "That's it. I want her cuffed. Get her out of my seeing." Two officers started forward, hesitant. They had heard the whispers, too. They saw the faces of the firefighters, who were now looking at Sarah not as a nuisance, but as a potential savior. It was a standoff. The roar of the fire, the ticking clock of the building's integrity, and the iron will of one woman against the fragile ego of a man in charge. Sarah ignored the advancing officers. Her focus was absolute. She turned to the stunned group of firefighters. "I need a Halligan bar, a flathead axe, and a 20-foot strap." Now, it wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered with the innate authority of someone who had led others into the jaws of death and brought them back. The young firefighter who had recognized her didn't hesitate. He spun on his heel and sprinted toward the truck, shouting, "Get her the gear!" His partner followed suit. Chief Thompson was sputtering, his orders lost in the sudden, decisive action of his own men. "Stand down! I am in command here!" No one was listening. Sarah took the heavy tools, the weight familiar in her hands. She moved toward the building, her steps economical and sure. She wasn't running, she was flowing, a force of nature moving to counter the one she was facing. She paused at the front entrance, a wall of heat and smoke pulsing outwards. Her eyes scanned the facade, reading the story of the fire written in the scorch marks and cracks. "The primary load is shifting to the north corner," she announced to the firefighters who had gathered behind her, now her de facto team. When I make entry, I need a concentrated fog pattern directed at the ceiling above the second-floor window, not at the window itself. You need to cool the superheated gases to prevent a flashover when I open the door. Understood? They nodded, their faces grim with concentration. This was a master class happening in real time. They were no longer following a blustering chief. They were taking orders from a force they couldn't yet define but instinctively trusted. She adjusted the simple cloth she had tied over her mouth and nose. No SCBA, no helmet, no bunker gear. It was an act that looked like madness, but to those who were beginning to understand, it was an act of supreme confidence in her knowledge and ability. She knew exactly how long she had, how much oxygen was in that pocket of the building, and how to use every precious second. With the axe in one hand and the halligan in the other, she took a deep breath, the smoke-filled air a prelude to the furnace she was about to enter. The crowd held its breath. The soldier's mother prayed. Chief Thompson stood frozen, a monument to his own irrelevance. The legend was about to go to work. The moment Sarah breached the doorway was a study in violent grace. She didn't smash the door down. Instead, she used the pointed end of the Halligan bar, the adze, to pry the frame just enough to see the lock mechanism. A single, perfectly placed strike with the axe sheared the deadbolt. She shoved the door open and immediately dropped to one knee, staying below the deadliest layer of heat and smoke billowing out over her head. The firefighters, following her command, angled their hose, sending a disciplined pulse of water vapor into the roiling blackness above the second-floor window, a shield against the physics of the inferno. Inside was a vision of hell. The heat was a solid wall, the air searing. Orange light flickered through a choking black fog, revealing the skeletal remains of furniture. To anyone else, it was blinding chaos. To Sarah, it was a map. She saw the flow of air, the pathways of the heat, the groaning language of the dying structure. Her internal monologue was a rapid-fire checklist: stairwell compromised, but the stringers are holding. Plaster and lath walls, not drywall, better fire resistance. Source of the fire is in the kitchen, rear of the building. Good. That gives me a survivable space on the opposite side. She moved low and fast, a phantom in the smoke. The years of training, the muscle memory from 100 similar breaches in war-torn cities, took over. Her body knew what to do long before her mind had to command it. She found the stairs, testing each step with her foot before committing her weight. They groaned in protest but held. On the second-floor landing, the heat intensified. The air crackled. She could hear the faint, desperate whimpers of the dog. Following the sound, she found them. The young soldier was on the floor, semi-conscious, with a piece of fallen ceiling pinning his leg. His canine Atlas stood guard over him, teeth bared at the encroaching flames but refusing to leave his partner's side, his fur singed, his body trembling. The dog growled at Sarah's approach. She didn't speak to it in words. She lowered herself, making herself smaller, unthreatening. She met its panicked eyes and held its gaze. There was a communication there, an understanding that passed between a warrior and a warrior's companion. The growl subsided into a whine. The soldier stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Atlas, go!" he rasped, his voice shredded by smoke. Sarah was already at work, assessing the debris pinning his leg. It wasn't just a piece of the ceiling. It was part of a major joist. Too heavy to lift. Brute force was a fool's answer. She needed leverage. She wedged the Halligan bar under the beam, using a chunk of fallen brick as a fulcrum. It was a simple machine, a principle as old as the pyramids. She put her entire body weight onto the bar. The beam lifted, just an inch. Then 2. "Now!" she commanded, her voice cutting through the soldier's daze. "Pull your leg out! Now!" He scrambled backward, pain shooting through him, but his leg was free. The moment he was clear, Sarah released the pressure, and the beam crashed back down. The entire floor shuddered. They had seconds. The escape was a blur of calculated desperation. Sarah looped the strap she'd brought under the soldier's arms, hauling him to his feet. "Can you walk?" she asked, her voice calm and authoritative. He nodded weakly, leaning heavily on her. Atlas, heel! The command was instinctual for the soldier, and the dog, despite its terror, immediately fell into position beside them. The journey back was harder. The fire had grown bolder, eating away their path of retreat. The main stairwell was now a cascade of embers. There was no going back the way she came. Sarah's eyes darted around the smoke-choked room, her mind a supercomputer processing variables. The window. It was their only way out. It overlooked a lower section of the roof, a steep, pitched slope, but it was a chance. She guided the soldier toward it, Atlas sticking to his side like a shadow. She used the axe to smash the rest of the glass and the window frame, creating a clear opening. Below them, the firefighters saw the movement and redirected their hoses, creating a curtain of water to give them cover from the intense heat rolling off the main roof. We have to jump, she told the soldier. It's about a 12-foot drop to the pitch. I'll go first. When I give the signal, you push the dog out, then follow. Do not hesitate. He looked at her, his smoke-filled eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. He had no idea who she was, but he trusted her more than he'd ever trusted anyone in his life. He just nodded. Sarah swung herself out of the window with the agility of a cat. She landed on the steep roof, her boots sliding on the hot shingles before finding purchase. She braced herself against a vent pipe. Now! She yelled. The soldier pushed the bewildered Malinois out into the open air. The dog landed in a frightened heap, tumbling before Sarah grabbed its collar, steadying it. Then the soldier followed, half jumping, half falling, landing hard beside her. For a moment, the three of them, the woman, the soldier, and his dog, were perched precariously on the edge of the inferno, illuminated against the flames, a tableau of impossible survival. The crowd below erupted into a single, unified gasp, followed by a roar of cheers that drowned out the sound of the fire. They had done it. They were out. As the ladder from another fire truck swung towards their perch on the roof, a black sedan with government plates screeched to a halt behind the fire line. A man in a crisply pressed uniform, a single star gleaming on each of his collar points, stepped out. He was a brigadier general, his face a mask of hardened concern. He bypassed the police line and strode directly towards the scene, his eyes fixed on the woman being helped down the ladder. Chief Thompson, his face pale and slack with shock, saw the general approaching and moved to intercept him, perhaps to offer an explanation, to salvage some shred of his authority. The general didn't even break his stride. He walked right past Thompson as if he were a piece of street furniture. The general met Sarah at the base of the ladder as paramedics rushed toward the soldier and his dog. He didn't say a word. He simply reached out and gently touched her shoulder. He looked at the angry red burn scar on her neck, then met her gray eyes. A universe of shared history passed between them in that silent gaze. Gunnery Sergeant, the general said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of command. He used her old rank, a sign of deep, abiding respect. I heard a rumor you were in the area. I didn't think they'd send you to a house fire. Sarah gave a small, weary smile. Just passing through, General. Saw a problem that needed solving. The firefighters who had helped her stood nearby, their faces streaked with soot and awe. They had just witnessed a living legend in action. The young firefighter who had first recognized her stepped forward, his helmet in his hands. Ma'am, it was an honor. Sarah simply nodded, acknowledging his words with a humility that seemed completely at odds with the superhuman feat she had just accomplished. Her gaze drifted to the young soldier being loaded into an ambulance, his dog, Atlas, refusing to leave his side, trying to lick his face on the stretcher. That was the reward. Not the praise, not the recognition. Just that. A life saved. A brother in arms brought home. That was all that ever mattered. The general turned his attention to Chief Thompson, who stood frozen, a deer caught in the headlights of his own catastrophic failure. The general's eyes, which had been warm with respect for Sarah, turned to chips of ice. Chief Thompson, he said, his voice flat and dangerously calm. The chief flinched as if struck. General, I had the situation under control. She interfered with a fire department operation. The lie died on his lips under the general's withering glare. What you had, Chief, was a failure of leadership, a failure of imagination, and a failure of courage, the general stated, each word a hammer blow. You were about to let one of my soldiers and his K9 burn to death because you were more concerned with your own authority than with their lives. You dismissed the single most qualified urban rescue expert on this continent because she was a woman in jeans. The general gestured towards Sarah. This is Gunnery Sergeant Sarah Mills. Or as she was known in Fallujah, the Wraith. The scar on her neck came from shielding 3 of her men from a blast that leveled a building twice this size. She has forgotten more about structural collapse under fire than you will ever know. She is a recipient of the Navy Cross. And you. He paused, letting the weight of his next words crush Thompson. Told her to get back behind the line. The circle of firefighters and police officers listened in stunned silence. The myth was now fact, the legend confirmed from the highest level. Thompson's face was ashen. He had not just been wrong, he had been spectacularly, historically wrong. He had tried to sideline a hero. The general wasn't finished. He looked at one of the battalion chiefs, the one the young firefighter had radioed. You are in command of this scene now. See to it. As for you, Chief Thompson, you're relieved. Go home. I suggest you start drafting your resignation. Thompson stared, his jaw working but no words coming out. He turned and walked away, not with anger, but with the shambling gait of a man utterly and irrevocably broken, his career incinerated more completely than the building behind him. He disappeared into the crowd, no longer a chief, no longer in charge, just another man swallowed by the night. The chaos began to subside into the ordered cleanup of the aftermath. The fire, its heart ripped out, was finally being tamed. Sarah stood watching the ambulance pull away, its lights flashing silently as it disappeared down the street. The general stood beside her. They'll be fine, he said. The soldier has a broken leg and smoke inhalation, but he'll make a full recovery. The dog's a little singed, but tough as nails. You saved them, Gunny. She didn't reply immediately, her gaze still fixed on the road. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a profound weariness. The ghosts of other fires, other rescues, other faces she couldn't save, always whispered in the quiet moments after. But tonight there was a peace. Tonight, 2 lives were safe. Anyone would have done the same. She finally said, her voice soft. The general chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. No, Sarah. That's where you're wrong. Almost no one could have done what you did. And even fewer would have. He looked at her, his expression serious now. I've been trying to recruit you for years to head up the new Joint Command for Disaster Response. You keep turning me down. I'm not a commander, sir, she said quietly. I'm a mechanic. I fix things, you're a leader. He corrected gently. People follow you because they see you, not because they see your rank. You showed them that tonight. Think about it. We could use a lot more fixing. He gave her shoulder a final, firm squeeze and then walked back to his car, leaving her alone with her thoughts amidst the steam and flashing lights. The young firefighter approached her again, a bottle of water in his hand. He offered it to her. We all just wanted to say thank you, ma'am. You taught us more in 10 minutes than we've learned in a year. She took the water, her callous fingers brushing his. She looked at his earnest, soot-stained face, and for the first time that night, a genuine, warm smile touched her lips. Stay safe, she said. Listen to the building. It always tells you the truth. He nodded, his eyes shining with hero worship. For him and for everyone who had witnessed it, the world had been remade tonight. They had seen arrogance humbled and quiet competence triumph. They had learned that a hero doesn't always wear a uniform, and that the deepest scars often mark the greatest strength. As the dawn began to break, painting the smoke-filled sky in hues of gray and purple, Sarah walked away from the scene. She slipped through the thinning crowd, just as quietly as she had arrived. Her job was done. She sought no accolades, no interviews, no further recognition. Her reward was the knowledge that a soldier was alive, that his loyal canine was safe, and that a mother would not have to bury her son. The story of what happened would spread, of course. It would become a legend retold in firehouses and police stations, a cautionary tale for arrogant leaders and an inspiration for the rank and file. The tale of the quiet woman with the scarred neck who walked out of the crowd and into a fire, who faced down authority not with anger but with irrefutable skill. The story of the wraith. But Sarah would be long gone by then, just another face on another highway, looking for the next problem to solve, the next wrong to right. She walked with the quiet dignity of those who understand the true nature of service. It is not about being seen, but about seeing a need. It is not about being praised, but about preserving life. It is the simple, profound act of following a clean heart, of caring for everyone, especially when the world has given up. Her steps were light, unburdened by the weight of her own legend. For in the end, true strength is not measured by the battles you win in front of a crowd, but by the silent, unwavering commitment to fight for what is right, even when no one is watching. The sun rose, a promise of a new day, a day that existed for a young soldier and his dog because one woman had refused to believe it was over.